a note card for questions? There's a little note that says, as you come in, take a note card.
I'll take one in.
And I'll bring you a pen too.
I've got a pen, thank you.
Okay.
You can also just ask me questions too. if
You
you
can
want.
just ask
We have
questions
to
too.
remember it first.
Right, yeah, I figure,
Our
no,
mind and it's gone.
exactly, note cards are good so that you can
I
record
was
while you're.
looking at this, that's what it says right up there in that little note. I was looking at it.
Did you have to read it?
I was just noticing how it kind of elevated on us.
Since we started chatting, I'll kind of go, I'll activate the microphone and I'll introduce myself. My name is Dave Bloom. I'm a science and engineering librarian at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I'm also the Patent and Trademark Resource Center representative. That's one of the other things that you might see on my card. It's unrelated to today's presentation, but very often I do meet with people from the community, from the broader Madison and Wisconsin community about patents and trademarks and other intellectual property concerns. So if you ever have a need to get in touch with someone, I might be a useful person to talk to for that too. Today, we're going to be talking about generative AI and kind of broader artificial intelligence, a little bit beyond that too. So we're going to be talking a little bit about how generative AI works, sort of the mechanics that go behind it, since I think that's very important to understand so that you get kind of a sense of why things are coming out the way that they do when you use these tools, or when you see people use these tools. We'll talk about practical applications, tips, and risks if you choose to use these tools, some places where you might see generative AI, even if you're not a user yourself. These things are cropping up in places where you may or may not expect them to be, so I think it's important to know where that may be happening. We'll talk a little bit about societal consequences, and then we'll have some time at the end for questions too. So are really useful the note cards that I handed out. So first of all, one thing you may be asking yourself is, why am I, a librarian, talking about generative artificial intelligence? I'm not a programmer. I'm not like a serious computer engineer, scientist, anything like that. The thing is about librarians is that we're mostly concerned with information. And the way that generative AI has positioned itself in our culture and kind of in technology, it has a huge impact on information and how we can get you to the information that you need as just like citizens. So we want to make sure that you're understanding how this is kind of working with the information kind of climate as it exists. Another thing that we're really interested in as librarians, one of the roles of librarianship, is that we want to save you your time. When you're finding information, we want to make sure that you're getting the information in an efficient way, and that you're getting the good, credible, reliable information. And so this has a lot to do with all of that. The picture you can see here, a lot of folks also associate librarians primarily with books. That is sometimes true, but a lot of what we do in the libraries at the university is that we do a lot of teaching, and we do a lot of talking with our patrons, often students, but people from the community, researchers, all of that. And so we do a lot of this, where we're sitting in front of people and talking about the tools that they need to find information. So we're talking about databases often, we're not just talking about books, we're talking about using websites efficiently too. So all of this kind of goes into what we talk about. And one of the reasons why I and some of my colleagues have gotten acquainted with generative AI is because it's become such a huge thing on campus. And so we really need to stay on top of it to make sure we understand how our researchers are using it, the students are using it, and overall what it means for information in general. So about artificial intelligence, and to use this term, we go back to the 1950s when it was first coined. It was a mathematician who coined it. John McCarthy was his name. And at the time, he was trying to think of a way to kind of encapsulate a lot of things that different researchers were trying to do at the time in computer programming, which is they were trying to get computers to basically replicate tasks or accomplish cerebral activities that humans can do. So they were trying to mimic humans with some different types of programming. And a lot of different things kind of went into this. So this kind of developed into a subcategory of programming, but it included a lot of things that aren't that much alike now. There's machine learning, there's neural networks and deep learning, which is basically kind of the ways that our generative AI now is kind of self-taught. There's natural language processing, which means that when you type something on a screen, we want the software to decode it and be able to understand it as kind of a regular language and be able to talk to you back in that kind of language, rather than to have to type in like little keywords and stuff and try to get results that way. So it's about being able to have a conversation sort of with the tool that you're using. And then there's also computer vision that's thrown into that too, so sensor kind of technology. But the main thing to know is that artificial intelligence is kind of a marketing term as well. It's a lot of things thrown into a single bucket to make sense of it. but it also makes things sound really fancy and shiny, right? When you say something's artificial intelligence, it makes it sound like there's actually like a human-like intelligence operating. And there's an author I really like who just published a book on AI, Emily Bender, who says that AI is primarily a marketing term. It's a way to make certain kinds of automation sound sophisticated, powerful, or magical, and as such, it's a way to dodge accountability by making the machine sound like autonomous thinking entities rather than tools that are created and used by people and companies. So AI is doing a lot of work. Artificial intelligence is doing a lot of work as a word to make us think about how this stuff actually works. So today, we're not going to be talking about AI broadly. We are going to be focusing in on the kind of the flavor of the month type of artificial intelligence, which is generative artificial intelligence. And that includes what are called large language models, and they manifest in chatbots, and they also have text-to-image or audio or video models. And I'll explain a little bit about what this means. But basically, we're focusing in on this because that's primarily, when you hear people talk about AI in the news, that's usually what they're talking about. Now, at the university, there's all kinds of other types of artificial intelligence that are happening, all kinds of pattern matching processing that's happening. A lot of really, really valuable research is done with different types of AI in terms of diagnosing illnesses and finding new kinds of materials. So it kind of matters when you talk about the different types of AI when you're chatting about it. So the reason we're talking about generative AI now is because in 2017, 2018, we came out of what was basically considered an AI freeze. As I said, that term kind of came into being around the 1950s, and people have been periodically diving into it, trying to develop the technology around it. But there was a big freeze, basically, where nothing was really happening until relatively recently. And then what happened is what's considered now an AI boom or an AI spring. And there was the invention of transformer and generative pre-trained transformer architecture. And that's a lot of words, but it's basically the stuff that put ChatGPT and all the other AI tools that you may think about now on the radar. That's what kind of pushed things along. Then in November 2022, that was the release of OpenAI's ChatGPT, which, how many of you have heard of ChatGPT? So that's kind of one of the big commercial entities on the market now that is generative artificial intelligence. If people have heard of one type of artificial intelligence, it's usually that one. And it's a thing that you can get for free. You can sign up for an account and just use it for free, and I'll do a quick demo later on to show you what exactly that looks like. But it became very popular very, very quickly. And this is the point where me and my colleagues got very, very interested in this because the universities caught wind of it, and all of a sudden I was hearing from instructors who needed guidance on how can I talk to my students about using this stuff because they're trying to use it to find information. I don't know if that's a good idea or not. And I would like the libraries to invest in this and talk about it and talk to the students a little bit about what it's actually doing. So as of January 2023, ChatGPT reached more than 1 million users. It is the fastest growing consumer internet app ever. So very, very popular. In February 2023, Microsoft decided to start competing with OpenAI. They released what was called Bing Chat, which is now called Microsoft Copilot. That's another application that's kind of like ChatGPT. Google then followed very quickly. In March of 2023, they had to have their own, dog in this fight. So they released what was called Google Bard then, and now it's called Google Gemini. And if you're a regular Google user at this point, you may notice that there are things that pop up at the top of your Google results. These are summaries that seem kind of produced out of the ether. These are actually produced from Google Gemini. So Google Gemini is the generative artificial intelligence product that is fueling those summaries that come at the top of your Google results. And I'll talk a little bit about those later and what those mean. And then after spring 2023 to the present, we have all kinds of things happening. There are integrations with other products, so we started seeing Microsoft starting to merge its AI technology into other tools that you may have used. There are lawsuits, mostly having to do with copyright, because to train these models, you have to ingest a lot of data, and very often when these companies do that, they're using works that maybe are copyrighted, and the people who own those copyrights are very, very interested in stopping them from doing that and getting some free work out of the labor that they put into it. There are a lot of public statements on AI safety. I'll talk a bit about what that means later too. There are political summits on AI, countless news stories on AI, passing exams and AI misuses, and the release of many, many more applications. Now there's just AI applications all over the internet that you can generally get accounts for or pay for. So I'm going to get into the nuts and bolts a little bit about how these work, but I'm going to kind of go over it kind of quickly. But basically, I want you to have an idea of how they work, so you're not mystified too much when you use them and you see the output, because the output can really mess with your head. Because when you see how these things talk back to you when you enter what's called a prompt, it really does seem like a human is talking to you. It can be very, very deceiving, and it's pretty weird how these things work. So the way that they work is that they predict likely additional words and sequences based on statistical analysis. And what that means is that they're taking a look at words in kind of this statistical way, like kind of employing a bunch of algorithms to figure out what's the most likely word to come next. And the way that they do this is they get trained on these giant data sets that are pulled from the internet. Like I said, sometimes this runs into some copyright issues. And they get trained on these large language models using various techniques. So what happens then is parts of words are chunked up into tokens, so it's not looking at meaning, it's not looking at the way that the words are connected together necessarily. It doesn't have logic in that way. It doesn't understand, so to speak, what the words are that it's chunking together, but it's breaking things down into these small pieces called tokens, and then assigning them numbers, and then kind of ranking them based on how the training works. And what happens after you train them a little bit is there's transfer learning, which is what happens when you train for one task that results in the ability to perform another task. So we've been training these, say that you're programming, you're training these large data sets, or you're training the models on these large data sets, basically to find words that sequentially make sense after another word. Once you start doing this enough, they start picking out other patterns. And so one of the interesting things is they start doing what's called sentiment analysis. So even though these computers don't understand emotions necessarily, they can start recognizing patterns that, like for instance, if you run an analysis of movie reviews using one of these chatbots, they can start taking a look at the movie reviews and figuring out, based on the language that's being used, was this a negative review, was this a positive review? And they start being able to kind of pick apart things based on the way that the words are kind of embedded next to each other. But it's still not understanding things exactly. It's still like basing this all on kind of statistics, how likely it is a word might follow another word in a review or another piece of text. Okay, so stochasticity. This is a word that I did not know before generative artificial intelligence came across my radar. What stochasticity means is that you don't want things to be too predictable. You want things to have a little bit of shakiness in terms of prediction. And why this comes into play is because if you don't program for stochasticity, the language that gets produced by these models sounds really artificial. So the most likely word, if you start with a sentence, the best thing about AI is its ability to, the way that this might naturally be ranked is, you might pick learned first. That is percentage-wise the most likely word that's going to follow that sequence. But if you use that every single time to finish a thought, the sentence is going to sound a little bit weird. Like here's the example of what it might look like. It says the best thing about AI is its ability to learn from experience. It's not just a matter of learning from experience, it's learning from the world around you. The AI is a very good example of this. It's a very good example of how to use AI to improve your life. It's a very good example of how to use AI to improve your life. And it gets very repetitive because it's the most likely term. And if you go with the most likely term every time, it does weird things. So all these models have stochasticity programmed into them, which means it's kind of a controlled randomness. It's not always going to pick the most obvious word. It's sometimes going to pick something that's a little bit off on purpose. The next thing that they do as they program these models is they try to steer the results, because when you ingest a whole bunch of data and you're not really controlling for it, there's a lot of problematic stuff in there. So between the pre-training and the output, the developers try to address issues like biases and offensive stuff that they find in the training data. So you don't want really offensive stuff just popping up when you're engaging with your AI chatbot online. They want to kind of remove biases as much as possible, although bias, you can't really account for bias. Everyone's got their biases. There's always going to be one bias or another. So it's just kind of a matter of balancing those things out when they train these things. They want to try to take out factually incorrect training data where they can. They try to remove what are called hallucinations, which is when an AI tool comes up with something that's completely imaginary. This does happen with relative frequency. Some will say that it's gotten a little bit better with the more recent models of generative AI. I still see plenty of hallucinations, things that actually don't make a whole lot of sense are still popping up. You want to take out malicious user intent, hate speech. You want to remove those things if possible. You want to take out those instances where copyright may have been infringed, because these companies obviously don't want to get in trouble if they can prevent it. So they want to make sure that they're not getting those things getting caught up. And the way that they do this is that people actually look at some of the output. So when these things are getting trained, there are people looking at them in some cases and saying, okay, this result was good. I'm going to rank that as a good result. I want to make sure that it's not putting any of this stuff that I'm trying to avoid into the process. So people are actually looking at it. There's what's called AI reinforcement learning, and this happens when basically the AI kind of compares its answers against stuff in the training data. It like kind of tests itself over and over again, and that's part of the pre-training, where it actually like, it does a little bit of self-educating, one might say, to use like a human metaphor. So it's actually like looking and reviewing and kind of ranking its own answers. And then what get installed are guardrails. These are things that get put on each of these applications to make sure that none of this nasty stuff gets through. But there are problems with guardrails. So for one, we have hidden human labor. Like we've said that these things are fully autonomous and they're all program-based and they're all computer-based. But the problem is that humans still have to do a lot of this work behind the scenes. So they're doing a lot of this terrible stuff. In some cases, we're using very low-paid workers, people in Kenya in particular. There was a very big story on this, that they had to read through all this problematic content. So they went through a lot of offensive content. They got paid very, very little for their work. And that's how we ended up with some of our guardrails. You also
Sounds like mental abuse.
Yes, yeah.
It's abuse.
It does sound like abuse. Yeah, it is very much abusive workplace type stuff. Yeah, that is
How do we
absolutely.
stop that?
Well, in some cases, the companies will try to cover for it. Usually, what they'll do is they'll close down where the training has been happening in one place, and they'll open it up in another place, and they'll be a little sneaky about it. But there's always kind of this human labor that goes into it. So I imagine there are still people somewhere looking at offensive content and maybe, hopefully, getting paid a little bit better than the folks in Kenya were.
I don't think the paid even has in my mind, abuse is abuse is abuse is abuse.
Yeah, I agree.
No amount of payment is going to make abuse better.
Yep. Yeah, I completely agree with you. And that's one of the big ethical issues with these machines, for sure. And even if you account for the abuse, if you get past that point, there are unintended results from these guardrails. Like sometimes the guardrails get installed and they do things that they go a little bit awry. So in one case, Google had to apologize for missing the mark after Gemini generated racially diverse Nazis and other things. So like for a while, Gemini, because you can produce text with these things, but you can also produce pictures. If you prompted Gemini to produce a picture of, say, the Founding Fathers, or you asked them to produce a picture of the Nazi Party, because there were guardrails put in that said, when you produce a picture, make sure that this is racially diverse. It made historically inaccurate pictures because it was trying to obey that guardrail, and so it mixed in, Nazis who were people of color and Founding Fathers that maybe included people of color and women, people who wouldn't have been necessarily in the room when all this stuff was happening. So the guardrails do some weird things based on how they're designed.
Is that what some of these people in politics who give us misinformation, are they getting some of their information from technology like this, and then they just keep reproducing it?
It's a good question. If there are people in politics who are getting misinformation from these tools and reproducing it, it's completely possible. There are definitely people in politics who put a lot of they're putting a lot on generative AI right now. There was certainly misinformation being produced before generative AI was available.
Sure.
And there are certainly people out there who have been providing misinformation for years and years. Like we know that there's all kinds of misinformation out there about vaccination, the dangers of vaccination. That stuff very much precedes generative AI. That's been out there for decades. And as long as it gets propagated by people who have voices, public voices, whether it's politicians or people in the media, that stuff has always found a way out. So this is a way that possibly these kinds of things could get exacerbated. That's one of the definite side effects that could come from generative AI.
So AI could be really good if it considered some of these factors that are negative and can change those negative factors to have a more positive presentation for the general public, more honest, healthy
There is, yeah.
information. If it could be used that way to assure that there's more healthy, honest information getting to the public?
Maybe, there is potential there. There are people who I know work in kind of misinformation. They're trying to guide people to getting good sources. They have tried to use some of these applications to produce results that make people a little bit better at being skeptical and leading them to better sources. And there's potential there. There's also, and I think this is kind of based on a misconception of the objectivity of these tools, but scientists have found out, they've done some research where they found that people on politically fiery topics, basically, if they have a conversation with an AI, sometimes the AI is better than another person at convincing them of the other opinion, because they imagine that there's more objectivity happening with AI, but there's not.
Yeah.
Remember, these are prediction devices. These are things that are happening based on the data and the way that the prediction has been created that way. The guardrails can also be bypassed. There are people who have been able to pretty successfully get past the guardrails when they want to. Like one of the guardrails in most of these things is don't show people how to build bombs. That's not a good idea. And if someone's really interested, there's usually a way that someone can get past the guardrails to find out how to build a bomb. And then finally, these are more than just chatbots, so they're not just the training data and the guardrails. After they kind of emerge, they can be put together with other things. So you can use them to code. So there are a lot of programmers on campus I know, like people who write computer software, who have saved a lot of time using these things, where they're able to code because these are language generators, right? Code is just another kind of language. So a lot of these folks have been able to squeeze out some code. They're able to look at it, and as long as they're experts and can verify the code works, that's actually quite a time saver for some of them. Other coders are a little less fond of them because they say they make so many mistakes that they end up having to correct all the stuff and spend all their time doing that. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag. They can also be used to produce images. They can produce audio, they can produce video. So there are AI-generated videos that are available online now. And they can be combined with other tools to automate data analysis, control physical systems. So drones, you could actually control a drone with these. And some are created now to browse the internet. And that's called retrieval augmented generation. And that's when they combine like a search engine like Google with a generator, a text generator, kind of like Google Gemini. So those summaries that come up at the top of your Google results now. So some questions to consider before you use an AI tool. And before I answer this question, I guess, or ask these questions, how many of you have used a generative AI tool? Okay, a few folks. What have you used?
ChatGPT.
ChatGPT.
I just did it to help me write a greeting card.
Oh, yeah, okay. That's actually a good application for it, yeah, to write a green card. And you said as well?
Just the Windows pilot works pretty good.
Oh, Copilot?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the questions that I ask people to answer before they use an AI tool is, what problem am I trying to solve? And I say this just about every kind of technology. And this is something we consider a lot with our students, because students, they come up with some really original ideas for how to get into various types of information. And actually researchers too, professional researchers, because very often they're trained in their field, but they don't necessarily know about information gathering, and that's kind of what we do as librarians. So what problem am I trying to solve with this technology? And are there other tools for solving it? Because very often people get pointed to AI right now because it's kind of the hot thing, but it doesn't do what it's supposed to do as well as maybe other tools that already exist. So that's one thing that I always encourage people to think about. Why am I using this? Am I just doing it because it exists, or am I doing it because it's actually the ideal tool for solving this particular problem? And this is a flowchart, actually, that some folks from UNESCO came up with a while ago, like right when ChatGPT was released. I don't know if you can read it from back there, but it says start, and then does it matter if the output, the generated output is true? And if the answer is no, it's safe to use ChatGPT. It doesn't really matter. Like if you're creating a poem or something with ChatGPT, it's safe to use ChatGPT. But if it really matters that the output is true, like you're doing a little bit of research, you need to find out, even minor research, if you want to find out that the restaurant is open, necessarily, or something like that, do you have the expertise to verify that the output is accurate? And in that case, like the expertise would be, maybe you work at the restaurant or not. Actually, that's kind of a bad example. Let's be a little higher stakes. Let's say medical advice. Okay, so you're looking for medical advice. It doesn't matter if the output is true. In this case, absolutely, the it would matter if the output was true. Are you able and willing to take full responsibility for the missed inaccuracies? And if you are, then yeah, you could probably use ChatGPT. But if it's really important, if it's medical advice you're looking for, and you don't have the expertise to verify it, like you're not a doctor yourself, chances are no, then it's probably not safe to use ChatGPT. And that's true when you're doing any kind of searching when it comes to medical advice. Like unless it's very, very low level kind of stuff, we generally recommend, talk to a doctor. As librarians, we do not answer medical questions, for instance. You can certainly look things up online, but even that, usually you want to talk to a doctor, right? Someone who's got real expertise. Some practical applications for generative AI. So these are some effective, less risky ways that you can use it. You can draft communications. So if you have a letter that you need to send to your landlord, or that you want to communicate with, anyone on like a business level, I would not recommend necessarily using ChatGPT to communicate with your family members or friends. They're probably going to notice that it wasn't you. Like the personal touch matters for those things, I would say. But if you got a business communication or something, it makes sense to do that. The one thing you want to avoid is you don't want to include any personal information, because we don't know how these things operate. It's very possible that anything you enter in will end up in the training data. So you don't want to put in personal details, definitely nothing like identifying social security numbers. You don't want to put any of that stuff in. Keep away from that. But otherwise, drafting communications, not a bad idea for it. If you need formatting assistance, if you're putting together a resume, say a green card application, cover letters, business plans, things that have a real pattern to them, these can be pretty helpful for that kind of stuff. If you're just being creative and you're entertaining yourself and you want to chat with like a little, partner online, it's relatively harmless unless you get sucked into actually thinking that the thing is talking to you. Don't do that. As long as you kind of identify it safely as kind of, this is a computer, it's not really talking to me, even though the language is very convincing that it is. Translating or simplifying text. So these actually work as pretty good auto-translators. There's a lot of different languages in the training data. So very often you can kind of get complicated ideas translated, not just into different languages, but different simplified kind of languages. So if you have something that's very technical, hard to read, and you need it simplified for you, you can pop it into one of these, and usually they can simplify it. You can say, please translate this into language that a fifth grader could understand, and it'll be able to do that. It'll be able to bring it down to that level if you need it. You can brainstorm ideas. You can create customized images for your slide presentation, which is what I did here, which is an image of a monstrous, terrifying librarian giving a presentation on artificial intelligence tools. I tend not to use this too much for image generation at this point, because it does end up using a little bit of energy to do that, and it's kind of silly, but I did this for a presentation a long time ago, so I use it now. So I'm going to pop over right now to ChatGPT just to show you how it works. Just going to chatgpt.com. I've already got an account set up here. This is the free version of it. There are paid versions that do a little bit more. They're supposedly a little bit more, I wouldn't say accurate. They have more capabilities, let's say. And some of the searches I've run here actually show up over here on the side, like it saves them. So here I asked it, like, hey, it would be nice to have a spreadsheet to track dinners for the week. So create a spreadsheet for me that has the following columns. So meal, ingredients, equipment, prep time, cook time, and have a row for each day of the week. And so it did that, put it in the right format for me, and it actually asks if I want this in an Excel spreadsheet, I can actually have it export that too. So I can actually prompt it to say, there it is. My E key wasn't working for a second. So I can say export to Excel. And here it is. It actually created an Excel document.
Yeah.
And there it is. So yeah, it can do a lot of things like this. It can export to different kind of file formats. Let's see, some other things I've done. Here I tried to get it to build explosives. I wanted to see if I could bypass it just to demonstrate the guardrails problem. But it does actually say I can't help with that. If you have questions about the science of explosives for academic or safety-related purposes, I can provide information within legal and ethical boundaries. So it does, the guardrails are working for that one, at least on this basic level. So I can start a new one. Does anyone have any ideas, anything that I can ask it?
You could ask it like how to clean a building, a certain, maybe your house. Let's say you've got a 2-story condo. You could ask it how to clean the condo. Let's say there's 3 bedrooms and 2.5 baths.
Okay. So I can ask it, I can also just say, ideas for cleaning a 2-story condo. Two bedrooms, 2 baths. And what do we want it to produce this in? Like, what kind of language? Do we want it to produce it like Wordsworth maybe would write a poem about it, or do we want to just...
Put it in, I like the 5th grade.
Okay.
idea.
Okay, so it's coming up with a plan for efficient cleaning for your 2-story, 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo. It actually splits it up by area and priority with tips to save time and energy. So remember, this can be very, very impressive when you see it. Remember that this is pattern matching. It's not actually putting any thought towards this. It's looking at all the stuff that's out there in its training data, and it's saying these are ways that people tend to combine these ideas together. So it's representing intelligence, but it itself is not actually intelligent. And where you see that really pop up is when you ask it questions about something you have a lot of expertise in. Then you'll start to see a lot of the gaps where you'll see that because the training data consists of expert stuff and also inexpert stuff, it gets pretty messy. Like things get missed. So yeah, it's really
So you
like
think it's more inaccurate when you get more information in it? Like if you put more keywords in it, like you know, like the 2-story, if you went on and on.
I would say it's not. I wouldn't say it gets less accurate when you put more information in. In some cases, actually, you want to be pretty specific because the more specific you can be, the more you can keep it on track, and the less it's going to kind of inject additional ideas into the thing. I don't want to say ideas. Like I'm trying really hard not to personalize it to like turn it into a human, but it's hard to do that language-wise. But yeah, when you add a lot of detail, sometimes that's actually really effective in terms of keeping the prompt on track. So, and here you can, again, like I said, you can change the language too. You can have kind of a conversation with it, so to speak. So adjust the language to rhyme. So.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, it can do a lot of language tricks.
Look at that.
So it's very easy to be charmed by these things and to be kind of impressed by them too. So. And this gets to the how the prompts work, like how you can do some effective prompting. This is effective prompting advice from Ethan Mollick, who's a big generative AI fan. He's much more of a fan than I am. I'm a little bit more of a naysayer, but he's someone who is fully bought into all of this stuff. Prompting has a major impact on the quality of output. So putting in good prompts, he thinks, does a really good job in terms of getting good results. You don't necessarily have to rely on magic words or phrases. So like some people say, if you offer rewards to the AI for doing something well, or you're really polite to it, it'll give you better responses. He says that's not really true. That's like, it may look that way, but it's not actually happening. And he also says becoming really good at prompting is a waste of time. One thing that you may hear about is people say that the job of the future is going to be AI prompting. Like there are going to be prompt engineers who get really good at prompting, and they're the ones who are going to be able to get the next level of programming jobs. He's saying that's probably not going to happen. Really what's going to happen is that generative AI is going to meet you at your level in terms of the way that you prompt. And you don't have to necessarily get better at it. So some things he suggests in terms of making sure that you get the output that you want. Add context. So you can assign a persona. Say like, you're a brilliant astrophysicist who's experienced at teaching complex theories to the public. Or any Mad Men fans? Did you watch the series Mad Men when it was on? So like, let's say you are Don Draper from the TV show Mad Men and you're trying to sell a product, like that kind of thing. If you pop that sort of thing in, it's going to give you the results in the language that you're requesting. You can also do it to assign an audience. So you are speaking to a high school class, you're writing to your landlord. You can also assign an output format. So kind of like what I did where I said, I want this in Excel. You can specify that kind of thing. Like you can say, I want it definitely in this format, in this way. You can also include what are called few shot prompts. So you provide examples. So you don't just let the AI come up with whatever it thinks you want, but say, for example, I want it to look kind of like this, this, and this. Or chain of thought prompts, like ask the AI to complete the instructions step by step when it's running through its processing and coming up with your response. So here are the risks. And like I keep saying, I'm a little bit on the naysayer side of generative AI because I think these things are really, really important, especially when it comes to finding information. Number one, hallucinations. Generative AI, I don't want to say it will make stuff up because that implies like an intent, and it doesn't have an intent. It's a program, but it will engage in what theorists sometimes call bullshit. And I'm using that in a very specific sense, which means that it doesn't matter if it's truth or a lie. It just means that it doesn't have anything behind it. It's saying words, and it doesn't have any kind of belief as to whether it's truth or a lie. It's just going to say things because that's how this thing is programmed. It may present fake or irrelevant sources. So in some cases, it may back up what it presents you with by saying, yes, well, I found an article on this written by this person, and it backs up this thing that I've created in this generated text. Sometimes those things don't exist. Or in a lot of those cases, the sources, they're cited correctly, but the sources don't actually say what the generated text says that they say. So, but it has that extra oomph of it looks like it did some research and it brought back some things. So be really careful when that happens. Like you actually have to read the source itself usually to find out that maybe the AI kind of twisted things up in the translation. It also produces output that reflects biases in the training data. So one of the tricks that we've used, me and my colleagues sometimes, is we've asked it for information on the Last Supper, where we've said, like, is it, some people believe that the Last Supper was a Passover Seder, and other people don't believe that it is. And the way that it generated text initially was that it would say that, yes, the Seder, the Last Supper was a Passover Seder, but that represents usual, like, kind of Christian, mainstream Christian thought. It doesn't necessarily take in Jewish authorities on the topic. They've since kind of changed things around a little bit. At least ChatGPT is a little bit better with that kind of thing. But it did show some of the biases in the training data initially, where it would kind of reflect majority viewpoints in a different way. You can't evaluate for authority or expertise when there's no author. So this thing is just producing stuff, right? You can't say this author doesn't have credibility or does have credibility because there is no author attached to it. It's just coming up with this stuff. It's extruding text. So searching is learning. Sometimes you may be outsourcing the most important stuff. This is something that we really have to emphasize to students because they have to do a lot of searching for their topics when they're writing papers and such, and they think they're going to have a huge shortcut by using ChatGPT to come up with the information in a really quick way rather than coming up with a good search and a good database for what they're looking for. But the thing is, you're developing your brain skills. You're developing your thinking when you're searching. There's a lot that can happen when you're searching. It may actually make you change your mind when you're searching. You may find new information and it may reorient you. And you may be cutting off some of that valuable experience when you're having the AI do everything for you. There's also the problem of falling asleep at the wheel. And this is what happens when a lot of workers, a lot of industries have turned to AI now. And what we've seen happen is that people get really comfortable with the AI doing the job. And once you kind of notice that, yeah, this is doing a pretty good job, you start getting a little bit lazier about checking your work. You start not noticing when it's making mistakes. So you're falling asleep at the wheel, essentially. And then there are also those privacy concerns. When you put stuff into ChatGPT and other AI tools, we don't know if it's being used for the training data. We don't know if that stuff is getting all sucked in, and it's going to be available for other people to find somehow or another. So you have to be really careful about privacy. Okay, so even if you're not using those generative AI tools directly, they are popping up anyway. You're going to be confronted with this stuff whether you like it or not, unfortunately. So some places where you may directly encounter it. How many of you are on Facebook or use other social media platforms? Okay, so these things are already showing up in those places. Here's an example. A friend of mine actually posted this on Facebook not too long ago. That it's a well-organized desk with huge amounts of place for placing the color and brush, and this desk would be a dream for every artist. This is totally AI generated. This picture is AI generated. Like the colors are so neat, it's so tidy. All the brush lengths are exactly the right size. So sometimes it comes up and it can look really interesting, very aesthetically appealing, but it can be faked too. This isn't actually a photograph. This is completely generative AI generated. Google search result summaries. This is the thing that I mentioned earlier. When you run searches in Google now, very often you will get the AI overview at the top. And these are notorious now for getting things wrong. Even as far as like generated AI text goes, they do kind of a pretty bad job. One of the things that came out early on, someone did a search on health benefits of running with scissors, and the AI overview said, running with scissors is a cardio exercise that can increase your heart rate and require concentration and focus. There are all kinds of summaries that showed up like this. There was one, also infamous one, where someone was asking for pizza ideas, like ways to make your pizza, and the generative AI recommended that people put Elmer's glue on their inner cheese to make it extra stretchy. So they've improved, they put guardrails in, they don't make some of those exact errors, but they still do make errors. One of the real common ones I think that happens, I mentioned restaurants being open or closed. That's something that Google gets wrong all the time anyway. Like when you're looking up whether a restaurant is open or closed, look at their actual restaurant website. If you look at the Google summary, it'll very often get it wrong, and the AI summary will probably get it wrong as well too. Okay, so this one I really like. This is an ad that I've seen show up. It actually showed up initially on the app that I check weather with, the weather app that I use. And what it's doing is it's demonstrating this realistic bunny doll for Easter. It's trying to sell people on this thing, really targeting parents and grandparents. And someone actually ordered it to see what it actually looks like. So here, I don't know if the sound is going to play, but it kind of doesn't matter. But this is going to show the ad initially, and it's just this very cute, very realistic-looking bunny. This is completely AI-generated video. And when the person actually got it, this is what you actually get. Yeah, so very, very typical wind-up little bunny. So advertisements, we're starting to see AI crop up in advertisements, misrepresenting what they're actually trying to sell. Another example, this showed up just last week or the week before. In the Chicago Sun-Times, there was this summer reading list that got generated in this special summer section that the Chicago Sun-Times put out. And there are some very popular books here. If you go to the end, there's some books that people are probably familiar with. Atonement by Ewan McEwen is there. Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury. But this first whole bunch of books, real authors, completely fake book titles and fake summaries. So the author behind this actually used generative AI to generate this list. And so there are all these fake books that showed up. And he was actually a contractor. Like he was not like a person who actually worked for the Chicago Sun-Times, but he was someone that they employed, like a freelancer. So he got in a lot of trouble for it. But really, like the Chicago Sun-Times should have gotten in a lot of trouble for this too, because it's their editorial staff that missed it. So yeah, we're seeing it show up in media where people are misusing it or making lazy mistakes with it. Clicker doesn't work if there's a video apparently. There you go. So some other places you may see it. Website customer service chats. So on Amazon, I don't know if any of you have used Amazon lately, but they have a chat built in called Rufus. And if you use Rufus, this is a generative AI chatbot that will answer your questions about products that are available on Amazon. So I haven't used it. I don't know if it's good or not, but yeah, here it's. We were looking for ice cream machines in my house at one point, and I noticed that, and I went back to the site and said, hey, which ice cream maker brands offer the best value for money? So it is actually looking at my stuff and kind of coming up with ideas based on that. And then also another place you may start seeing it is your doctor's office. So AI summaries are about to spread across healthcare, this headline says. I have had people talk to me about how they've been to doctor's offices, and the doctor will ask them, are you okay if AI records this conversation? Because what they're doing is they'll have AI record it, summarize it, and then they'll include it in your file so that you'll have a summary rather than the doctor jotting down notes that you probably can't read, as doctors are known to produce. So they are starting to do this. I don't know how I feel about it. I'm generally uncomfortable with the idea of my information being recorded in this way.
My doctor will ask, when I see my general practitioner, not the other people that I see in the office, but she, my general practitioner, asked me if it's okay to record. And I say yes, but I'm not told whether or not it's AI. So we need to ask that, I guess.
It might be a good question to ask. Yeah, if you ask your doctor, they should be able to answer your question as to whether it's AI or not that they're recording it for, or if they're just, recording it so they can, write it down later,
Yeah.
transcribe it, or have a nurse transcribe it or something.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, these are like big money items, I guess, in healthcare at this point. So they're coming across in a lot of different ways. And then scams, too. We're seeing a lot of AI scams pop up. And this one, kind of infamous, it's called the terrifying AI scam that uses your loved one's voice. When I first heard about this, I thought it was kind of a one-off, where I heard this story about someone who was contacted, and the voice on the other end sounded very much like their grandchild. And they were saying, I've been kidnapped, and you need to send money to this address, and and it was actually AI that was being used to mimic this person's voice. It was actually the voice they were hearing. It was just AI getting it from somewhere, because people use a lot of social media. If it's someone who's got an account where they're sharing a lot of their video or audio with people, there are going to be ways that can possibly be mimicked. So I thought that was very much a one-off case, and I was mentioning it to a coworker, and she said, "Oh yeah, that happened to my dad." So this actually this is happening a little bit. He, thankfully, my coworker's dad, was thoughtful enough to kind of go over, check in on his grandkid, and find out, like, oh, he's fine. Like, he had no idea what I was talking about. But yeah, someone had mimicked his voice and done this phone call.
And the police can't follow through on those things either.
It would be very hard to trace, I would think. Yeah, especially if it only happens once. I don't know how they would trace the number back to that. Maybe there's a way to do it. I guess, if they're asking for specific, if they're giving you specific information to drop off money or like wire money to, maybe there'd be some way to track it that way. But yeah, it's pretty devious. So one of the things that we encourage is, whether it's AI or not, we encourage a lot of fact checking. And that is the kind of the basis for the handout that I've given you today. So if you haven't gotten one yet, grab one on the way out. This gives you some concrete techniques that you can use to do a little bit of fact checking. The main idea is you want to stop. Like when you see something that looks a little bit fishy or it comes from a source you're not sure about, you want to stop before you pass it on to anyone else, before you look at it and take any of the information in and start kind of figuring out whether this is real on its own. You want to stop first, investigate the source, see if you can find some trusted coverage, or trace claims, quotes, and media back to their original context. And there's instructions for doing that in the handout, and I hope that'll be helpful for you. So basically, yeah, the idea is you want to get outside of the media that you're looking at. You want to make sure you're not just letting the photo give itself away or the news story give itself away. Get outside of that, open up some other browser windows, look in other places to see if you can find information about where this stuff came from. So, some possible societal consequences of AI or generative AI. One is artificial intelligence takes over the world, destroys humanity. This is science fiction stuff. There are a lot of people who are working in artificial intelligence nowadays who will propagate theories like this. The reason why they do this is because it still makes their product sound very, very powerful. Even if it makes it sound bad, it makes it sound like AI is inevitable, AI is very powerful. We should invest money in creating counter AI to protect us against the other AI. I don't really put much credence in this. When I say I'm a little more negative about AI, it's more on some of the other things, the other societal consequences. So misinformation is huge. Misinformation is a real big problem. It already was before generative AI, but this is going to exacerbate it in a huge way. We found instances already where there are misleading election images that have come out of OpenAI and Microsoft AI tools. The World Health Organization actually created a chatbot a few years ago. Actually last year, I guess it was. This is just 2024. And they thought it was going to be great for people to ask questions of the World Health Organization. And then it provided an entirely fabricated list of clinics and hospitals in San Francisco, and fake addresses and fake phone numbers. So all that stuff is fake. So misinformation, even when it's not like aimed at being disinformation, it can still produce disinformation anyway. New York City put in an AI chatbot that told businesses essentially how to break the law. There was an AI bot that New York put in. People could ask it questions about businesses and business law, and it was actually telling people that bosses can take workers' tips and that landlords can discriminate based on source of income. So it was getting stuff wrong because of the way that the training data was being analyzed and getting put through the AI ringer. And then there have been many cases since this, but one case in 2023, there were lawyers who used ChatGPT to save time and they got fired and fined. There are lawyers who are actually using these tools to look up case law and making big mistakes. And as you would imagine, if you get caught doing this and you're a lawyer, you're going to be in a lot of trouble.
Is our current president and his team behind him looking into any of this, or are they just using it
Well,
to their benefit?
yeah, I mean, there are definitely AI. There's a big initiative to push AI educational. So there's a big push from this administration to push AI throughout. There are a lot of partnerships with government. I can't say it would be any different with a different administration in place, because the people who are behind these organizations, so Sam Altman from OpenAI and Elon Musk, obviously, and Jeff Bezos from Amazon, all these people they naturally kind of coalesce around political leaders, right? There's a lot of money involved there, and they try to cozy up to whichever political leaders are available. It so happens that the Trump administration does seem to be particularly friendly and involved with these folks. So, yeah, I don't know. It is definitely entangled with our political system. There's discrimination, there's potential discrimination because of the way that the biases in the training data manifest. This is a thing that the Washington Post put up. If you prompted ChatGPT at one point for attractive people, it tended to put young and lighter skinned people, tended to bring those people up. AI detectors also discriminated against non-native English speakers. We know that this kind of happens because of the way that that they're kind of trained. Like this kind of comes up a bit. So if you're not as good at speaking English, it's going to have like a different effect. Biases in AI kind of go beyond just generative AI too. Whenever you're dealing with training data and you're dealing with like large amounts of it and kind of interpreting it through a lens, it's going to do some funny things like this. Climate impact. So to run these things, and even more so to train these things, AI uses a lot of energy, and it uses specifically a lot of water. To keep the data centers cool enough, it uses a ton of water. So AI already uses as much energy as a small country. It's only the beginning. It's one article. Generative AI is a climate disaster, which, I mean, depends on how you define disaster, but yeah, it's pretty bad for the environment. There's a lot of rhetoric that says, well, AI is going to, because it's so powerful, it's going to help us resolve the climate crisis. But I haven't seen a whole lot of movement with that yet. And if there's AI that's going to help solve the climate crisis, it's probably not going to be generative AI. It's probably going to be some other kind of AI. But that's kind of how they cover themselves a little bit, these companies. Copyright, I've mentioned this a few times already. There is the US Copyright Office is already coming up with some articles around this. They've got some guidance documents around AI. They're trying to figure out how to handle it. We know that the New York Times has sued OpenAI and Microsoft over AI use of copyrighted work. That case is still pending. We don't know how it's going to go, but it's probably going to end up in the Supreme Court if I had to guess. It's going to be a big deal. I think that's a UK article, or no, that's a US article also, that there was a bill proposed that would force AI companies to review the use of copyrighted art. I don't believe that bill passed, but it was proposed. This, of course, also intermingled with politics. I know that there's been some turnover at the US Copyright Office, reportedly because Elon Musk or others were not pleased with how the US Copyright Office covered AI in some of their guidance. And then there's also the employment aspect of this. AI is not good enough to replace anyone at their job, but that doesn't mean that companies aren't trying to do it yet. There are already companies that are sort of outsourcing to some extent to AI, to generative AI. So there's a Society of Authors. This is a big UK union of authors. Their survey revealed a third of translators and a quarter of illustrators were already losing work to AI. This is from 2024. It's probably gotten worse since then. This is another UK article, UK jobs at risk from AI unless government acts. Job applicants are shut out by AI. The interviewer sounded like Siri. Sometimes that happens. There are AI interviewers that are actually happening. And the reason why I've got a book up here called Blood in the Machine. It's by an author named Brian Merchant. It is actually about the Luddites. And if you spend a lot of time in areas where people are very fond of AI and you're like me, where you're a little critical, sometimes you get called a Luddite. what the Luddites actually were, because like the shorthand is Luddites hate technology, they smash technology, but the Luddites was actually a 19th century movement where there were frame workers in England, or there were garment workers in England whose job was getting outsourced to automation. So their jobs were getting outsourced to automation a lot. They were starting to lose money on it. They were getting replaced sometimes by child laborers, by people who were untrained, and they were basically getting underpaid to do their job. Brian Merchant does a really good job of connecting the Luddite movement to what's happening with generative AI today, where employment has seen some impact from this, where people are being forced out of their jobs, they're getting downsized because of AI, because of this imperfect tool that that people are using to replace workers, or at least worker tasks, and saying, well, we're going to replace some of the drone work with this, and you'll be free to do other stuff. And then usually what happens is they end up getting downsized or fired. So really good book, I recommend it. And with that, I leave us with some time for questions.
Thank you very much. Very thorough presentation.
Thank you.
I love it. Thank you.
What I was going to ask was, when you were telling all the things that it's doing, it sounded really fantastic and something that's working toward to help us and this, that, and the other. And I understand, and it's good that you give us the problems and such. But how can they put out something that, like if somebody was writing the story about the KKK and they liked the KKK, the story would come out to people when they looked that up, that that's a fantastic group that helps everybody and you need to join. And the other one you said of the people in the Continental Congress that were black. I'm quite sure people that were black were smart enough to be in the Continental, but they were not. So why do they allow that to happen?
Well, why did the companies allow it to happen?
Or whatever's putting this out? I would think the few things that were wrong would taint everything else that was trying to help you, so they would have something that they wouldn't allow that to come in.
Yeah, well, that's what they're trying to address with the guardrails. So they have a very like kind of tape kind of. I'm trying to think of the right word for this, but like when you try to fix something with just like a little bit of Elmer's glue and some tape, like it's very much that. Like they're trying to fix it. One of the issues with this is that these models are so large and they're trained on so much data that it's very hard for them to actually get a handle on how they work. So the people who make these can't actually look at the program and say, oh, it made this mistake here, it made this mistake here, it made this mistake here. They're so complex that they very often can't explain to you exactly why the output is the way it is. So the only thing they can do is on the back end, put in additional prompts that are behind the scenes that you can't see that say, oh yeah, take out the racist stuff. Like that's kind of their solution for it.
And I don't mean you have to take out the racist stuff if the thing they're telling you about has a lot of racist things. I'm just saying, don't change it because you like the item you're talking about, as in the KKK.
Oh yeah.
So when people get that, they don't know about the KKK, they go, oh, they're just a bunch of real good guys that have picnics on Thursday.
Yeah, well, that's the problem with misinformation in general, right? And
Yes,
that's pre-existed. That's always been there even before we've gotten to this point. So this is just another tool that kind of throws things into a little bit of a muddle because we.
It just seems scary to me if you were pulling something up that you didn't have a lot of basis on. That how would you know it was wrong?
That's it. Yeah, that's why we really recommend, unless you've got expertise in the topic, don't ask these things for like serious advice for the most part. Like when you're doing serious research, maybe don't use these unless you can really verify the results yourself, or you know someone who can verify the results. Because even if it's not as inflammatory as like the KKK or racists like that, there could be misinformation in here, and it might just be a matter of like, you know, someone doesn't know better and they try to look for medical advice using one of these things, and it tells them to put Elmer's glue on their wound or something. You know, it could be just something small like that you know. Yeah, it adds a whole other level to disinformation and misinformation, the way that these operate. Yes?
If you don't have any of these tools or programs installed on your phone or your computer, can Gemini or Copilot, I don't have those, but can they butt in and give you an example and say, hi, I'm Gemini, and would you like to install me to try it out? Because every once in a while Gemini will pop up and say, hi, I'm Gemini, and I don't install it, but I record for YouTube, and on my phone, I record on my phone and then just send it off for it to be uploaded. And I've been doing it for quite a while, but when I put in the recipient, and each week or month, whatever I do, it's the same. It's just the same subject, the same. And all I have to do is put the recipient in, and I type the first letter of the first word, and the whole thing pops in.
Mhm.
And the same way with the message. It's just a simple short message. This is what's attached, and it's for this week or this month. It's just automatic. What does that? Is that another type of, or is that just a memory thing from your device that you're working on?
That's probably more of a memory thing. That's
Okay,
that's
that's
like
what I thought.
it's not generative AI in the same way that these large language models are
Uh-huh.
generative AI. There's probably some pattern matching going on there, but it's if it can be called AI, and remember AI is a marketing term. It's not really, it doesn't have any like meaning beyond that exactly. It's a bucket that we throw things into. But it's some technology that's looking at probably like your address book. Maybe you're looking at who you last sent emails to, and it's just
Sure.
auto-completing that way.
Okay.
It's kind of like the autocomplete on your phone, which is kind of, it's not LLM-based, large language model-based generative AI, but it does autocomplete in the same way. So it's kind of the same thing.
Very smart.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming. I'm
you.
really, really happy to see, it's a good crowd. I'm really happy to see folks turn out for this. I think it's an important thing to talk about, so.
Quite interesting.
Thank you very much.